Welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. Broadcasting from Glasgow, Scotland, this is the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent, and you can get involved by calling free on the UK. The number is 07822833548. That's 07822833548. Or click on the link beside the video. If you click on the link, just follow the simple instructions, enter your name, and whether you agree or disagree, it's free. So call in or click on the link and join the discussion. Now, this show is a deep dive into the human condition, an interzone of information, if you will, and whether we are discussing the paranormal or politics, we tell it without dogma, and it will be the stark truth from our own experience. So today on the Elixir, we have paranormal investigator and author of The Baron of Rainbow Bridge, Paul Christian Owens. He is coming on to talk to us about a hotspot of paranormal activity called the Overtoun Estate, that at first glance appears as a picturesque location near Dumbarton, Scotland. But if you visit Overtoun and stay a little longer and dig a little deeper, you may find out it is a site of hundreds of animal suicides, ghost sightings, along with a historical backdrop of tragedy. And now, what's not to love about that, you know? And, I live, not to give away my location, but I live not too far away from Overtoun. And I visited it for the first time myself, and it's a nice location. And it is unseasonably warm in May this year in Scotland. However, and opinions lack the wit and true grit of my guest. So, without further ado, Paul Christian Owens.
Hi there, Vincent. How are you?
Hello, Paul.
Hello.
It's
Can
good
you hear
to
me?
have you on. Yeah, I can hear you
Brilliant.
fine. Yeah. So, how are you today, Paul?
Yeah, very well. Just enjoying the, as you say, unusual, warm weather we're getting here in the west of Scotland. So all is well so far.
Well, I have to confess that I'm very ignorant regarding the history of Overtoun, the bridge, the paranormal events that have taken place. I learned most of it from Gareth John, to be quite honest. So first, could you provide us a little background about yourself, how you became interested in Overtoun and what it is you do?
Yeah, well, by profession, I'm a teacher of philosophy of religion, and I've always had an interest in the paranormal, unexplained phenomena, and since I was a child. And so, because I grew up and lived in the town of Dumbarton, and I lived a short distance from this weird, spooky bridge called Overtoun Bridge, then I became very aware of the strange dog leaping incidents that were
Mm.
happening there over many years. And so I just felt it was really upon me to research this mystery. I thought maybe that someone local would have better knowledge of the mystery, better insight, rather than someone in
Mm.
London, for example.
So when was the Overton Bridge constructed, and who constructed it?
The bridge itself was built in 1895, so it was quite a long time ago. And this particular bridge, if you go there or someone wants to visit it and have a look at it, you will see the kind of structure it is. It's a very sort of old Gothic structure that is quite a striking looking edifice. And the actual bridge itself was built by a man called John Campbell White, otherwise known as Baron Overton. He was a wealthy
Mm.
Scottish industrialist who had, huge amounts of money to build this bridge. And it was built in 1895, really because his father before him, James White, had wished to build this bridge over this gully on his private estate next to his castle. But the land was owned by an adjacent landowner called the Reverend Dixon Swan, who refused to sell this land on the other side of where the bridge now stands. And so they weren't able to build this bridge initially because the land was privately owned on the other side of the bridge. Through time, Dixon Swan, they actually relented and decided to sell the land. And so then the bridge could be built between Overtoun Castle, or Overtoun House as it's now known, and then over the bridge onto the adjacent farmland. So that took quite a bit of time because there were a lot of years went by where they weren't able to because they didn't own the land, you see.
Hmm. Why is the bridge known as Dog Suicide Bridge?
Well, the Dog Suicide Bridge, as it's now known, or the Dog Death Bridge, some people call it that, or sometimes, as my book title gives away, the name Rainbow Bridge, is really a bridge where dogs in large numbers over many, many years have been.
Sorry, why Rainbow Bridge?
Rainbow Bridge is really just something that came from the Norse mythology, where there was a bridge that the gods would ride over every day and have conversations with mortals, and then
Right.
ride back over the bridge into the sort of heavenly realm. And so, because of that idea, the idea really was spawned that Overtoun Bridge is a kind of thin place, a place that where heaven and earth have somehow
Mm.
collided or overlapped. And it's like a kind of rainbow bridge idea. The gods come from the higher abode across to the land of the mortals, converse with the mortals, and then go back to the higher abode again. So it has a
Right. Right.
strange, a kind of mythical feel to it.
So to return back to my question, why is it known as the Dog Suicide Bridge exactly?
Yeah, okay. Well, the dog leaping phenomenon occurring at Overtoun Bridge is really become known as the world's greatest dog leaping mystery. And for several decades, if not well over a
Mm.
century,
And
enormous numbers of dogs have been leaping of every
right.
conceivable shape, size, colour, and breed over the walls and parapets of this bridge to their death and injury. So, because of these incidents and these dog spates, it has become popularly known as the Dog Suicide Bridge, that dogs are leaping over the parapets down the 60-foot gully to their deaths and to the rocks below.
Mm. Is there any particular breed of dog more than any other that has leaped, or is, as you said, is it just out, across the breeds?
No, there is some evidence to suggest that many of the breeds that have leapt off the walls of this bridge to their injury and death are hunting breeds, hunting dogs, which is
Right.
true, but it's not strictly true that every conceivable type of breed has in fact leapt off the walls of this bridge. Shape, size, colour, breed, they've all done it. The other thing I would mention is that there was a presumption by many people out in the press and otherwise around the world that the dogs all jumped from the same part of the bridge. The parapet at the very end of the bridge, they said was they were jumping from there, which is true. But in fact, my research showed me that dogs were leaping from all parts of the structure and from all
Mm.
different parapets. So there is no just one part of the bridge this is happening.
So what do you think's the cause of the dog leaping or dog suicide phenomenon then?
Yeah, well, roughly, people, when they talk about the reasons why these dogs are leaping in enormous numbers, they generally fall into one of two camps. Either one, people believe in a scientific, rational explanation that can be evaluated rationally. For example, some people think it's the sound of the waterfall below the bridge is attracting dogs towards the water, and they leap over because they're inquisitive. They hear the sound of the running water. Other people think it's to do with the scent of various mammals. It could be mice, mink, or whatever. Usually it's the mink that has been blamed as the animal that's residing around the vicinity of the bridge that's producing a very strong musty odor, which the dog gets a whiff of the scent, and it just triggers it to leap right off the walls. So you have these kind of scientific explanations. Then, of course, people like me who believe, well, although it's credible, these ideas, they're not watertight. And in fact, I believe that the real explanation for these dog leaping deaths is a paranormal explanation. And there are many, many different aspects to the paranormal side of this mystery. I have said in my book that I believe that for me personally, there is a ghost residing at this location. The ghost of the bridge's builder, Baron Overtoun's wife. Her name was Grace Eliza McClure, otherwise known as Lady Overtoun. She has been seen by many, many people over many, many
And I was going to ask
decades.
you a question about the Lady Overtoun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to get into the stories about the Lady Overtoun, the spirit of Lady Overtoun. But just to focus right now on the dogs and that phenomenon, although we know that's connected to the mythology of Lady Overtoun. But how many animals have lost their lives jumping, leaping off the bridge? And is it just dogs, or is there any documentation to show that other animals have perished at the site abnormally, from jumping?
Well, the as I've said in my own writings, having researched to try and find out the number of dogs leaping from the structure is almost impossible because of the remoteness of the location. Dogs that leap are not always recorded. Owners don't come and tell anyone. I've spoken to the police; they have no record of the dog deaths. Strathclyde Police at the time. Some vets in the area are aware of obviously having to deal with dogs that have leapt and are injured or have died, but there's no exact device that can be used to find out how many. What people generally say is some people say there's anywhere between 100, could be 200. The press have put it at 500 or 600, some newspapers. But I would say it's probably somewhere in between. So there are several hundred dogs most certainly have leapt from the structure since its creation in 1895.
Right. Yeah, I read somewhere online that it was around 300. I don't know if that's a high, number there, but
Yeah, 300 could be even more. Because this bridge is in the countryside, it's remote. Dogs can leap, fall, survive. Nobody mentions it. It's just forgotten about. it's hard to really know an exact number. If the bridge was located, for example, in the centre of the town of Dumbarton, there might be a lot more evidence or people, being able to see this happening. But in the country, it can be a very sort of quiet place up there, so we don't really know. It's anyone's guess, but certainly.
Is there any other bridges you could compare this phenomenon? Like, so how many animals jump off some bridges with similar constructions in the surrounding area or in Scotland? Is this truly a unique case, or is there another bridge with a similar style of construction that has had many dogs leap off of it in the last century?
This
Is
is
this
a
truly
bridge.
an anomaly?
Yeah, this is a bridge without parallel anywhere in the world. There are no any other bridges that are similar to this one or of any other type that we know of that huge numbers of dogs are leaping on a regular basis from the walls and parapets down the huge drop. As I've said many times, if one dog leaps from a bridge, this is unusual. But if 2 or 3 dogs leap from the same bridge, then this is deemed as extraordinary. But if more than 3 dogs leap from the same bridge, and in the case of Overtoun Bridge, we're talking about several hundred, this is beyond rational explanation and enters the realm of the unexplained.
Okay, so to get into the unexplained and the paranormal, what is the legend of the White Lady of Overtoun? How does she fit into this paranormal picture?
Yeah, well, the White Lady of Overtoun is a quite a strange one because when I was a child, I, as I say, grew up in the town of Dumbarton, and even when I was a young child at primary school, say about, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, even at that stage, the stories of the White Lady of Overtoun were well known. I remember hearing about it in school. People were talking about the White Lady away back then. So this is something that is not just something that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, where dogs have jumped and people have said, "Oh yeah, the White Lady." The White Lady has been around a very, very long time. As I say, the White Lady is believed to be the spectre of Lady Overtoun. Now, I must say, Lady Overtoun herself had a very strong connection with this bridge in life, because if you go to the east end of Overtoun Bridge, you will find that her name is carved onto the bridge itself, because Lady Overtoun was the person who opened the bridge in 1895. Right. And so she has a personal connection in life with this bridge. And so during her life, she would walk across the bridge on a daily basis. Her and her husband, Baron Overtoun, were very religious people. They would pray on the bridge. They would stand in the parapets and pray and meditate. She would walk her own dog across this bridge. And there was a story that she came from Biarritz.
What was their religious background?
Yeah, well, both Lady Overtoun and Baron Overtoun, they were both Calvinists. And so they were members of the High Free Church, which actually still exists, the building in Dumbarton High Street, although it's no longer a church. But they were both deeply involved in Calvinism. But Lady Overtoun herself, as I say, she has a strong personal connection to this place. And there is a story when she came over from France, back from France, she was staying in Biarritz. She was actually piped across the bridge in a horse-driven carriage by 2 Scottish pipers. So she held the bridge in deep respect, deep reverence, and it was a very special place to her. So when Lady Overtoun died, she was grief-stricken at the death of her husband. And it was said that she often wandered across this bridge, deeply upset and mourning for the death of her late husband, Baron Overtoun, who died in 1908. So this bridge, for many people, they believe that her spirit, her presence, her spectre, her ghost has been seen in and around the Overtoun estate and on this bridge. And it's
sorry for interrupting, but I believe my producer is mentioned in your book, and he also saw the spirit of Overtoun when he was younger, Gareth John.
Yes, Gareth John, a good friend of mine. Gareth, he can probably tell you better than me about what happened to him if he's
Mhm.
online right now.
Yeah, yeah. If
Mm,
you want to come on, Gav, sure.
I've just added myself to the
Right.
stage. Yeah, when I was about, I don't know, 3 or 4, sort of pre pre primary school. I was just sitting one day. I'd heard sort of whispers of this white lady ghost thing. Didn't believe it. Wasn't really bothered. I was just sitting there one day, eating my cereal, Saturday morning cartoons, 80s, typical Saturday morning, and I was sitting with myself in the living room of the Barnhill Lodge, which is not the next house, but the house after that, so like 2 doors, 1 door down,
Mhm.
and I just happened to look out the window, and I seen this sort of old lady with her hair in a bun, but she didn't look with sort of big puffy, sort of old style, old Victorian dress, and she looked strange.
Was she transparent in a way, like the?
Yes, yeah, she was like sheer white, sort of off-white grey, translucent. Could see trees behind her. Could see the Overton house
Mhm.
behind her. She walked all up the neighbour's path and got to sort of perpendicular with the house. Looked at me, shushed me, walked a couple more feet, and then just vanished
Mm.
into thin air.
And how did you feel when you?
I was spooked. I was terrified.
So,
I, my parents found me behind the couch.
oh,
You know,
did
what
your
was it?
parents see anything like?
No,
No.
they were like, "Oh, you're just at it. You're
Right.
just a typical kid. Wanting attention. You've got your turtles on. Shut the hell up.
Mhm.
Film it. It's like, but there's a ghost. It's like,
Mm.
aye, sure, son.
So,
Um,
so Paul, how many cases reports are you aware of people seeing this same spirit, the White Lady, that
Yeah,
Gareth John believes he saw?
sure. I mean, Gareth, was himself, as he said, he saw this. And when I spoke to Gareth initially, I was intrigued to hear his story because he lived on the estate. That was of importance. But there have
Mhm.
been many other people I've spoken to have had extremely strange experiences on that estate. And quite a few have witnessed this white lady figure. There was a case way back in time. Maybe it could have been back in the 50s. It was actually my aunt that told me this story. She knew the two boys who were concerning this. They had seen a ghostly figure dressed in white when they were walking down the Overtoun path coming away from the bridge itself. And they'd been walking, they'd been climbing in the crags that day, and they were actually turning home down the West Drive, which is the road that leads away from the bridge. And they were going in the direction of Dumbarton. And these two boys, when they reached a slight incline in the hill, um, they experienced something that would change their lives because right in front of them appeared a whitish figure. And as they watched, the white figure just moved through the trees and disappeared, literally vanished before their eyes. And realizing this figure was not human, well, the boys ran in terror down that road. And they were both sensible boys of good character. They would never return to Overton again. That was in the
Mhm.
50s. Then by the 70s, the lightweight lady appeared a bit more frequently around the estate. There was a taxi driver called Barry Jackson who I interviewed, and Mr. Jackson had lived in the area for years. One day he had an unexpected glimpse of the White Lady herself. He had been visiting Overton in the early hours of the morning with a group of friends and was looking across a field not far from the bridge when he saw what appeared to be a lady dressed in whitish grey wandering through the mist. He was taken aback by this, and he soon realised he wasn't seeing a human. It was actually some kind of apparition.
Mhm.
And so, all of these kind of things. One of the most startling White Lady sightings came from a man called Ian Fisher, who was a retired police officer, and he started a dog walking business. And he used to take dogs up to Overtoun to, just walk the dogs around. But one day he started to walk a dog called, it was a border collie called Jess towards the bridge. And whenever he got to the bridge, the dog would pull back. This border collie refused to cross the bridge. It wouldn't allow him to go over. And so he couldn't understand why this dog was freezing and not moving. And as he glanced up towards the castle, Overtoun Castle, the most strangest thing he saw, because what he actually saw then was a grey, shadowy figure standing at one end of the bay windows. It seemed to be there for a few seconds. Then it just completely disappeared. So it was very strange. And the big mystery about this sighting of this lady at the window is that at that time, Overtoun Castle was totally boarded up. No one was living there. It was inaccessible. No one could go there. But yet, this figure was standing, peering out the window across the bridge.
So what do you think the relationship is between this spirit and the dog suicide phenomenon?
Well, to just tell you something that's of interest about this spirit, people say to me quite often, how do you know there's anything there? Well, apart from the sightings of the ghost itself around Overtoun, a friend of mine that I knew years ago, who's a photographer, he said he wanted to do some photographs of me doing research around the bridge one day. And so I took up a lot of paranormal equipment to Overtoun Bridge on the actual anniversary of Baron Overtoun's death. It was the 15th of February, I recall, the date of his death. And so one of the things I did, I went below the bridge to the parapet at the northwest end, and where most of these dogs, or a lot of them, have jumped. And I took down a special K2 meter, which is used to try and detect presences of, let's just say, things from the spectral world.
Sorry for interrupting. A K2 meter, is that an EMF meter? Could you describe that?
That is correct. It's an EMF. It measures electromagnetic frequencies, which are often said to be present when there is something from the supernatural world present. Okay. And so this particular meter, when I stood under the bridge, I asked, were there any spirits in the area at this time? Was there anyone there? And to my absolute astonishment, the lights on this meter began to light up. Now, there's a whole range of colours like yellow, amber, green, blue, right up to red. And the lights just flickered right off the scale, up to about 30 milligauss plus, which is beyond, belief, because that's the equivalent amount of energy you would get from a microwave oven, right?
And did that field encompass the entire area, or was it localized to one specific spot?
It was actually at the bridge. This happened right under the bridge itself. Right. And this happened with the meter. I did it a second time and it happened again, but then the lights flickered and went out after the period. I tried it several other times again and it didn't happen. So that tells me the readings were not from any electrical wiring source around the bridge or pylons, because if there were wires there, when you conduct an experiment, it would always show up the same readings. Every time it would be virtually the same, but it didn't. It just stopped dead, which told me this is extremely unusual, very unusual. Mm-hmm. So that was, that kind of confirmed to me there was something very unusual going on there. On the bridge itself, I know that there has been many dowsers. Teams of dowsers have been up with dowsing rods, and many of the dowsers who crossed over the bridge felt that the rods were crossing roughly about in the middle of the structure. There was a lot of dowsing activity witnessed by the West of Scotland Dowsers group. Mm.
Why would that have any? Why would the dowsing have any significance exactly? I'm quite ignorant as to what dowsing is, to be quite honest.
Right, dowsing can be many different things, but dowsing can detect if there are earth energies there, or if there are some supernatural fields at work. Um, what is unusual is that a number of these dowsers, the dowsing rods, did cross over roughly in the same area, which may demonstrate there are some strange energies below the bridge, may not be connected with a ghost. It's possible some kind of earth energies, ley lines, or something like that. But they can also detect unusual, as I say, paranormal kind of activity as well. But whatever caused it, something caused it. That's the point. Something caused this, because it's not normal for all of these dowsers to have that same experience. And also, myself, back in 2007, I was standing on the bridge with a friend. I was photographing the structure. I was carrying out research from my book, The Baron of Rainbow Bridge. And when I did this, I felt like a phantom finger was jabbing into my back twice very hard. It caused me to jolt backwards. I didn't know what was happening. I actually was a bit freaked out. I thought, what is going on here? So I shouted over to my friend who had wandered off the bridge. I said, come over here. Has something or anything happened to you here? He said, no, what are you talking about? Well, I said, it's just happened to me twice. Like a finger being jabbed in my back, a ghostly finger. So for me, it was confirmation that something was happening. And I've never experienced it since, but it actually connected with me on that occasion.
And you've not, well, I was going to ask, you haven't experienced any comparable paranormal events prior to this? This was something that happened alone at the Overtoun?
That's the only thing that kind of happened to me. But it's worth mentioning this as well, that the land that Overtoun Bridge was built on had a supernatural history before the bridge was built there. Because way back in time, there was allegedly an appearance of a band of fairies on the Overtoun estate. It's well known. And these kind of fairy experiences happened to a local whiskey smuggler called Roderick McTavish about the early 18th century. He was coming off the moors at Overtoun. He stopped at a rock to have a rest with an illegal keg of whiskey. When he heard the sound of what appeared to be the laughter of tiny voices. And so as he was creeping closer, he saw a fantastic otherworldly sight. There, dancing in the hazel dell in front of him, was a band of fairies dancing, drinking the whiskey. And, it was, he was so astonished. He thought he was hallucinating. But he eventually joined the fairies in dancing and drinking and toasting whiskey throughout the night till the cock crowed the next day. Then the fairies
did they describe how they appeared?
So, tell me that again.
Did they describe how they appeared? Did they describe how the fairies appeared, their appearance?
He gave some small kind of descriptions about how one had a tall peaked hat. They were clad in sort of certain colourful leaf type clothes, boots and things. There were some descriptions, and he talked about one that was the fairy kind of leader of the fairy ring. But
yeah, have you ever heard of researcher, writer? He's did a lot of things. He's a computer scientist too, Jacques Vallée.
I'm not familiar with that name, although
he's written a lot about the overlap between the mythology of the fairies, fairy rings, trolls,
yep,
stuff like that, and modern day ufology. And in the book Passport to Magonia, he documents a lot of stories regarding the fairy commonwealth, what fairy rings are, how they were described, and the fact that fairies were often described as malevolent beings that would abduct people. and sometimes they weren't returned, or if they were returned, they would report being taken to a strange land called Magonia. Hence the name of the book. I think it's called Passport to Magonia.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, we
for
should
sure.
give it a read. It's especially with the overlap in terms of like the 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 reports of abductions and aliens and stuff like that. But is there any stories in Scottish or Celtic mythology that overlap with Overtoun and what's taking place there?
I'm not sure there would be. Maybe just the fairy encounters, which have been witnessed by many in Scotland and Ireland as well. But I know that the fairy thing goes back before the building of the bridge. It was something that people would talk about. They could hear the sort of the sirens and the strains of the singing of the fairies up at Overtoun. And so the Overtoun fairies were something that were quite well known, particularly, as I say, back in the 18th century, it was quite well known. Not so much these days, though, but I have read up on it, and I'm aware of their history. The dog leaping thing you asked me earlier, was there any other animals that had jumped off of there? I personally haven't seen anything like that, but I did speak to one man who told me that sheep had jumped off the bridge in the past, but I'm not sure how much credibility there is with that. Right?
Has the function of a bridge changed as a result of these strange events at the site? I mean, what I mean is, for example, the Erskine Bridge now has a barrier built into it to prevent jumpers. Has there been any modifications to the bridge since its construction, or is there anything been planned to prevent any more animals jumping to their doom?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, the thing about the barrier. First of all, because Overtoun Bridge is a listed building, it's a listed bridge, listed structure, alterations of that kind, they would have to get permission, which more than likely wouldn't be granted, because you can't just alter, an A-listed building or even a B-listed building. It's protected. The other thing about such a barrier, and I did some research into this, if you put a barrier on a bridge like that to stop animals from leaping over a tall barrier, unfortunately, it's a bit of a kind of mistaken myth to think dogs still can't get over, because dogs that are trained by the police and by the military, as any of those dog handlers will tell you, a dog can easily leap 6 to 8 feet over a wall. So even if they put a huge barrier up, it wouldn't stop dogs leaping. They would still be able to leap over it. And even smaller dogs like border collies, they can leap enormous heights. Even not big dogs, but they can easily leap 6 feet. So the walls of the bridge are about 2.5 to 3 feet, something like that, 2 3/4. If you put a barrier up at 6 feet, a dog could still leap it if it wanted to.
Do you think because the walls are quite small, that is a major contributing, factor as to how this has happened? How so many dogs have jumped off the bridge because as you said, walls are not that high.
Walls are quite low, but one of the points that was made by Dr. David Sands, who's the scientist who's responsible for the mink scent theory, he believed that because the walls were quite low, then a dog trundling across the bridge itself, it still wouldn't see over the walls, and so it would probably just leap over with quite some consummate ease because the walls are quite low. He thought they were doing that to be connecting with the scent of the mink, but as I've said elsewhere, mink are actually nocturnal animals anyway. They don't come out during the hours of daylight, really, and all of the dogs we know jump during the hours of daylight, so it's not probable that that's happening. But I would also say about the walls, you're asking about the walls, dogs can gauge a sense of heights. They don't just jump over a wall blindly. A dog doesn't just decide to jump a wall when there's a 60-foot drop at the other side. And the other thing is that the sound of the water below. Dogs have got exceptionally good hearing. They know there's water a distance not far below that bridge. So there's just no way I think a dog would make that leap.
So do you feel that the presence of the White Lady, her spirit, is pulling, or that there is some malevolent energy there that is pulling, attracting the dogs to jump off the bridge?
It is my belief that it is a ghostly spirit that's operating, that's lingering at this location. The reason I said Lady Overtoun is because she has such a strong connection to the place, and her name is carved into the walls of the bridge itself. But people have said to me, well, why would Lady Overtoun want dogs to jump off her bridge if she had a dog and loved dogs? But the point I've made is I believe it's not that she's doing that. What's happening is the animal enters the bridge. Then there is an apparition or a vision that they see of this ghost, the White Lady ghost. They see it, and the White Lady is calling the dog towards herself. And as the dog bounds towards this vision that they see of this ghost White Lady, what happens is the dog just leaps towards the vision in excitement, but suddenly finds it's over the edge of the wall, and it's actually now falling down into the actual gully below.
And as we know, the dog's senses are different from our own. So, however, dog would see or feel the presence of the White Lady maybe would be different compared to our own. So if a person like Gareth John saw the White Lady and it disturbed him or frightened him, maybe a dog would experience curiosity, or it would just feel an interest. And when animals are interested, will they approach the object of interest?
No, that's it. The object of interest. Dogs are naturally inquisitive, and they will, if there is something that gives, calls them towards themselves, they will show excitement. They will go towards a figure like that. In fact, the other day, in my garden, a dog approached me and did exactly that. One of my neighbour's dogs. So,
I'm more of a cat man myself, to be quite honest.
Right.
Well, listen, Paul, could you stay on for 15 more minutes, because Gareth John would like to ask you a question, and I know I would like to ask, could you take a question from a caller too?
Sure, indeed.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Could you stay on for 15 more minutes to take a question from Gareth John and a caller?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Okay, well, we're going to hit a break and we're going to play a song. So, after the song, we'll just continue the conversation. Okay?
Perfect.
Right, okay, well, I'll speak to you in a couple of minutes.
Speak to you soon. Thank you.
The train said Moscow as I stood against the wall, stranded in Warsaw with no one to call. I needed to get there before the heat came down. I knew that my future lay deep down in the underground. Meet me in Moscow. Come on and meet me in Moscow. The mood was undecided. Some of them scratched their heads. The truth was ill-divided, broken like a frozen piece of bread. But I needed to get there before the heat came on down. I always knew that my future lay deep down in the underground. Meet me in Moscow. Come on, meet me in Moscow. And meet me in St. Petersburg by the sea. I know that something's waiting for me. Golden visions as the bronze horseman rides. Then we'll glide into Moscow overnight.
Okay. Welcome back, and that song was performed by my good friend Johnson. And don't forget, if you like and or are learning something, you can subscribe and follow at YouTube and Twitter X, Rumble too, anywhere you find us. And oh, you still with us?
Yes, indeed.
Can you see Gareth John fine?
Yes.
You see you?
Yes.
Okay, Gareth John,
Right.
go ahead.
Well, good to see you again. My question was, I think you kind of already touched on it, but you know how in your book, Baron of Rainbow Bridge, you mentioned that Baron Overtoun himself was an alchemist and a sort of occultist. He really, he had an interest in that sort of stuff,
Yep.
and
Yep.
the bridge has like occult symbols carved into it and the capstones and whatnot.
Yep.
I was wondering if you think that that's made the thin veil thinner, or do you think the land itself, even like before the fairy sightings and whatnot, is just like a paranormal hotspot, like a hellmouth or a thinning of the veil
Yep.
or something like that? Do you think it's a naturally occurring supernatural place, or do you think it's sort of being infected by the dabbling of the occult by man?
Two very good questions,
If
Gareth.
that makes any
Excellent.
sense.
Very good. No, that's very good. It's not. I don't often hear those angles about this particular mystery, but they're two separate things. One is what is known as the alchemical curse, which was said to have fallen on the Overtoun estate because of Baron Overtoun's dabbling in the ancient forbidden art of alchemy. And that is something that is possibly very real, because alchemy is, as the listeners may or may not know, is a magical art where base metals such as copper, tin, and lead were transmuted into pure gold. It was also known as the art of the fallen angels, because it was said that these fallen angels had given the knowledge of how to make base metals into gold to humanity. So, if it is true that Baron Overtoun did engage in alchemy, then he may have become tarnished by the incestuous presences that these fallen angels could have brought upon his estate. Now, what evidence is there for such a bold claim? Well, I can tell you, when I began my research at the Overtoun estate, as I walked round the castle, the bridge, various other parts of the estate, I could see there was lots of carvings on walls, images all over the place, and I wondered what many of these images actually were. And so, having done considerable research into the images that were found on the Overtoun estate, in the castle, on the walls of the castle, on the bridge itself, led me to believe that he was somehow involved, possibly in alchemy. And then, to my absolute astonishment, later down the line, when I researched further, I actually discovered that he had put huge sums from his vast fortune into building a secret alchemical factory called Cosmoid, along with other very, very wealthy investors. And the purpose of this secret alchemical factory was, in fact,
Oh,
to
2 seconds.
sorry, I'm getting a call. Hello.
Hello. Hi,
Hi. What's your name?
Susan.
Susan. Okay. Susan, do you have a? Sorry for interrupting, Paul. Susan, do you have a question for Paul?
Well, I'd just like to say it's powerful eerie that fact that $300 to themselves off the bridge. Yeah, it makes me think I should go and check it out for myself. But what I wanted to do ask Paul was, is there something in his own life that made him take paranormal interest and investigate things? Did he have his own paranormal
Paul,
experience?
can you hear that question?
Yeah, something in my own life that made me investigate the paranormal.
Yeah, there's something in your own life.
What I kind of, since a child at primary school, I always had an interest. I used to, when I was a small child, I used to go into my father's bedroom, into his bedside cabinet, and he had all these books in there, like, for example, Charles Berlitz, The Bermuda Triangle, or books by Eric von Daniken, Gold of the Gods, Chariots of the Gods. So I used to take these books out of his bedside cabinet when he was away, and I would secretly read these books. So I was only about maybe 8 years old then. And I was interested in it then. And then when I got to young teenage years, I was about 13, I used to go down to the library and get out books on UFOs, ghosts, paranormal phenomena, ectoplasm, all kinds of other things like that. So I always had an interest in these things from a very, very early age.
Is there anything you would like to ask or say, Susan? Susan still with us?
Yeah.
I think she's gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
Still with
Okay,
us?
well,
She's gone. Okay, well,
She-
thank you, Susan. Paul, you were saying something about alchemy and the Baron being an alchemist.
yeah.
What I am faintly aware of is not alchemy the search for the philosopher's stone, a kind of state of consciousness where for the person can transcend the limitations of ordinary existence. It's not so much the transmutation of physical objects as it is states of mind. Is that close to what alchemy is, or have I got it all wrong?
No, you're right. There is such a thing as spiritual alchemy, which is a different type of thing. Spiritual alchemy is about the purification of those things in the spirit realm, the mind, consciousness, or whatever. But physical alchemy is more about somehow changing these metals into gold, which has went on for hundreds and hundreds of years by all kinds of people. Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelly were involved in these practices. He was Queen Elizabeth's conjurer. And
Yeah.
so, there's been all kinds of people who were fascinated with alchemy. But what's quite strange is that, when we go back to the days of this strange factory that Baron Overtoun was involved in, there was no one involved in creating an alchemical factory way back in sort of 1906. I mean, that's astonishing. to think that in Scotland such a thing even existed.
Well, hasn't Scotland got quite a rich history in terms of maybe not so much the occult, or you could describe it as a cult, but going back to Rosicrucianism and Rosalind's Chapel and Scottish Masonry is something that, has
Yeah,
existed.
well, it does exist. Scotland has a strong heritage in the mythological events and history about, I quite rightly talk about the Rosalind Chapel, an intriguing place of mystery for sure. It also has a Masonic connection, the apprentice pillar, astonishing, things that are in there. So Scotland has these amazing things that people can go and see and research. The thing about the Overtoun one is that it's a very, very unique story in the sense that I believe it to be one of the great animal mysteries of our time. Because when we talk about animal mysteries, for example,
How long have you been researching it?
I researched it for about 12, 13 years in total, which is quite a long time, because when I started to look into this Overtoun mystery, there weren't any books I could draw from, get information from. There was a blank slate. It was a blank canvas. So there was no references I could look up. I mean, if you get a book on Bigfoot, you'll find thousands of references of all these books and magazines you can look at and get some information. I had nothing to go on except other than the idea that this was happening.
See how you're talking about the carvings on the bridge and around the castle?
Yes.
I don't know, have you been in the sewers of the castle? Because I have. And there's even carvings and stuff down there. And that reaches from just next to the bridge. It actually goes all the way down to the Martin Police Station in Belmar.
Interesting. Right.
And they used to use that for evacuations during the war. But there's actually carvings in and around underneath as well, which no one would see. So why would, having them there is very, very sort of interesting and curious.
Certainly is. It's very unusual. And I didn't know about that actually, Gareth. So thanks for letting me know about that. I had no idea, not having been down there.
We used to find ninja turtles down there when we were like 6 and 7.
Right.
What are the carvings? Do you remember?
Just pretty much exactly the same as what's the serpent and the rods and Hermes and lion heads and stuff like that. But it's like we always thought there were sort of like markings so you didn't get lost.
Yeah.
But on the bridge, some of them repeat, so you get lost. It's very, very. It's really, really bizarre. It's proper labyrinth down there as well, and it goes actually underneath.
And what is the name of that has the two snakes wrapped around the rod? Is that a caddis or?
Hermetic caduceus. Yeah.
That's not a very Christian symbol, is it? Why?
Well, that's a great point.
Someone who is a Christian have that carved into their structure?
Very good, Vincent. An excellent question, in fact, because
have you got any ideas why?
Yeah, well, the thing is, this is a strange parallel twist to this story. Here is a family of deep religious Calvinists who were so obsessed with their own religion that their castle was bedecked with religious images all over it, inside it, everywhere. And even on the walls of the castle itself, there are biblical scriptures carved all around the walls of the castle. Yet, on the other hand, we have this other strange side to things, where in the castle itself, there in fact was a large 3-foot statue of the god Hermes in the dining room. Very strange in the home of a Christian Calvinist. And if you go into the castle itself, when you come in the front door, if you look at the vestibule, there are painted images all round the walls that have no connection with any Christian religion at all. It's all from the kind of Greek religion. And one image in particular stands out, that of the serpent twisted round a pole, painted on the wall of the castle. You know, so what is going on? He seemed to have embraced Christianity, and that's great. But he also
all that's missing is some Egyptian,
Yeah. It's a very, very eerie place at night as well. I've stayed over there once. I wouldn't do it again. It's really, really eerie. You should tell Vincent about the angel room, which is very interesting because in your book, well, from the outset, it looks like a very sort of Christian sort of thing. But in your book, you go into details of why that may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, well, it's, the angel room, as it's known, is a room that most people who have been brought up in Dumbarton are aware of this room, because when the castle was used as a maternity hospital way back in the 1950s or whatever.
Yeah, my mother was born there.
The mother was born, yeah. So that's it. So many people, their mothers, their brothers, sisters were all born in there. And it's well known to people about that room because they know of it, because of the babies being born in that room. But again, looking at the imagery, it seems as if people assume that the imagery came from the Bible. It's meant to be the imagery of one of the Psalms in the Bible. However, looking at the images, there's a question, because to paint the images of cherubim or angels on a wall or on a ceiling is forbidden within the religion of Calvinism, the very religion that they were members of. It's outlawed by their own religion. So why is it their whole huge castle rooms, that the actual ceilings bedecked with these angels everywhere? So it adds a strange twist to this mystery. Why are these angelic images plastered all over their ceilings? If you read Calvin and you read his Institutes of the Christian Religion, you will find there he says that it's forbidden to have these images of angels and things like that. It's not permitted.
Yeah, and I would assume that having cadices and too, that wouldn't really be permitted. I mean, look at the Rosalind Chapel. I may be wrong, but is there a swastika not carved in that structure?
Like that, yeah.
Somewhere in Rosalind Chapel. I may have.
I don't know. Personally, not seen it, but it is possible. But remember,
it's full Freemason stuff and that as well, which is very, very odd. Very sort of. It's got like Freemason stuff and sort of Celtic folklore stuff. Yeah, it's a very Christian church.
And you talk about alchemy, but I suppose you can also have the alchemy of language, how language and words can change, as well as symbols and spirit. So if you're referring to cherubim, seraphim, symbols like the swastika, the meaning of these symbols change through time. So I would assume that alchemy in part could be the transmutation of these symbols and these representations as a sort of manifestation of our consciousness. Because isn't that the very core of alchemy, in a sense, to change the world, including ourselves?
Yeah, it's about change for sure. It's about transmutation. But in Baron Overtoun's case, his alchemy was the alchemy of gold making, because he spent huge amounts of his personal fortune building an entire factory and complex down at Dumbarton, with one purpose, that was to turn metals like mercury into gold. And
I take it wasn't successful, because if it was, I would imagine that.
Well, I mean, they built the entire village. So he was coming from a place of avarice then. But like I was asking, do you think that the land itself drew him to there, or do you think that by him tinkering, it became this
Yeah.
hotspot
I,
of spectres and fairies and dog suicides
it's
and stuff?
had that for, I mean, go back to the builder of the castle was his father, a man called James White. And James White was married
Oh,
to,
right, like White's Corner.
yeah, Fanny Campbell was her name. They were the ones that built the castle. Now, the land was there obviously before the castle was there. But as I say, the history of the land was imbued with the supernatural because of the fairy encounters. It was already known as a supernatural place before they built the castle and then latterly the bridge. So it's possible that there is something there or some kind of ley lines which exist running through the earth itself. It may well be that that is a place where the ley lines cross and they built the bridge on that exact spot.
Yeah.
And
also
down,
there's the Witch's Tunnel.
Yeah.
Where, according to urban legend, either women gathered and did sort of in a coven and did rituals, or it was used to for witch trials where they would throw them off the bridge to see if they floated. If they drowned, they died a good honourable Christian death. If they floated, they were a witch and they were
Did
burned to the stakes.
that happen there?
Not on that bridge, but there's a bridge just over from it called the Witch's Tunnel, which they did that there, which I believe is a slightly older bridge. There's Dumbarton has quite a sordid history of witch hunters, including a guy who had a fake witch test, which was a retractable pin. So he would stab a woman with it and retract it so she wouldn't bleed and go, she's a witch. And when they found that out, you get charged with over 500 murders.
What do you think about that, Paul?
Yeah, interesting. Sure, that Gareth refers to a kind of bridge further down from the Overtoun Bridge. It's a bit further down, called the Witch's Tunnel, and yeah, it's possible that there were some witches activities there of some sort. That's why it's always had that name. But and also you're talking about the stuff about floating in the water or sinking and all that. The dowsing chair or whatever they called it, the duking chair. So very interesting. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, are there any other locations that are in Scotland that you are investigating or wanting to investigate as a hotspot of paranormal?
Not in Scotland, no. I investigated the palaces of Versailles over in France. I went over there and carried out paranormal investigations at the palaces of Queen Marie Antoinette and King Louis XVI. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah.
But in Scotland, there's places like, I don't know, Boleskine House, which has a sinister reputation attached to it, which is on the south side of Loch Ness up there.
Okay.
Is that the palaces? Is that the place that's reputed a lot of Edgar Allan Poe?
Boleskine House was the house that was owned by the magician Aleister Crowley, who
No. I know the house you're talking about. I'm talking about in
Versailles.
the Palisades.
I'm not sure about Edgar Allan Poe, what his connection is, but the palaces over there were subject to a very, very bizarre paranormal experience that happened in 1901 when two women saw all of these people around the palaces that were dressed out of time, dressed out of character. It was as if they were in some kind of time slip.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
tell
So they claimed that they saw,
you told me about that as well. Yeah.
you know, but that's an interesting story. But there's a lot to that one.
That was
So
interesting.
yeah.
So is that your next adventure then? Well,
Okay.
Yeah.
I tell you what. We'll wrap this one up, and So, Paul, if it's been good having you on, man, and if you'd like to come on again, that'd be great. But if there's anything you would like to promote or just tell us about,
Well, I just want to thank you, Vincent, for your really kind invitation to come on your show. It's really been great to be there and talk to the listeners, and also very great to hear from my old friend Gareth Johns, who's been very helpful to me over the years in providing me with inside information about Overtoun itself. As for promotion, well, really all I can promote is the story I wrote about Overtoun. Title of the book: The Baron of Rainbow Bridge, Overtoun's Death Leaping Dog Mystery Unravelled. You can get that. Best place to get it's probably online.
I think Gareth
through
John is
my
showing it
I'm
right
holding up a picture.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. So that book can be purchased from just type in Paul Owens Overtoun Bridge, or even just type in Overtoun Bridge, the book, and you'll get it there. So that's it, really.
And I'm enjoying that myself. I haven't got through it yet, but I'm going to be finishing it soon. So I've got Gareth Johns provided me with a copy. So,
Fantastic.
thanks to the both of you.
Yeah, thanks again, Paul. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really good book. I do recommend it. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I know quite a bit just from living up there, but it's fascinating read. Really, really informative. You've certainly done your research. You've done yourself proud.
Oh, well, thanks for that, guys. I greatly appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, right, Paul. Well, it's been good having you on, and nice speaking to you, man. And
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks again, and take care. Yeah.
Okay. Right, goodbye.
Bye.
Okay. And I hope you all learned something and enjoyed that episode. We will be back next week with something I hope equally interesting. Catch you later.